What a wake-up call I think we've had again with the Calgary main rupture. I wanted to make a video about this, not to come on and provide up-to-date news specifically. And the fact that this same water main has now ruptured twice in just over basically a year and a half is, I think, a very obvious example of the true sort of critical precipice changing point that we are with our infrastructure. And I really wanted to talk about how this is not a problem that's specific to one city, one province, one state, one country. This is a huge North American problem. And it's a problem that is near and dear to my heart and is really at the crux of why I started this channel, because I want to talk about how critical our infrastructure is and how intertwined our lives are with infrastructure. I'm also feeling pretty clairvoyant right now because I wrote an article a few weeks ago that I hope to have published in the new year about our underground infrastructure. And I intend that article to be part of a series just generally talking about our infrastructure. But I wanted to start at the foundation, at the base level, talking about our below grade infrastructure. So that is everything, obviously, that's below our roads and our soils and our infrastructure, houses, buildings, everything like that. So that includes conveyance systems, distribution systems, transmission systems for water, wastewater, stormwater, and sort of everything in between. The problem is all of this infrastructure is truly out of sight, out of mind. There is generally two types of it. There's shallow, which is the case of the Bears Paw water main in Calgary. That's about 3 meters below grade. And then there's deep, which is up to about 40 meters below grade. They follow major roadways for an installation standpoint, for constructability, because it's easier to either linear drill them, directionally drill them, or trench and install them under a roadway that you're already building, which is fine and dandy when you go to build it. When you have to fix it, or when they rupture, like in the case of last night in Calgary, it severely damages the roadways as well. A lot of layers that are built upon this foundational piece of our infrastructure that I really want to talk about. In Canada, there's over 470,000 kilometers of below grade conveyance piping, we'll call it. So that's, like I said, water, wastewater, and stormwater distribution lines. Industry Source told me that it's now costing, in 2025 figures, about $64,000 per meter to repair deep transmission systems. So $64,000 per meter times 470,000 kilometers, call it. That's over $30 trillion on a napkin calculation that basically needs to be spent. And if Calgary is not an obvious sign and a wake-up call to every citizen across North America, then I don't know what is. And to that end, there's been over 600 water main ruptures of this type of pipe alone. So this is a PCC pipe, a pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe. So there's been over 600 massive ruptures of this type of pipe in North America since 2008. 2 ruptures happened in the city of Calgary in a year and a half is a signifier of the future to come with our critical infrastructure. The name suggests it's pre-stressed. So that means that there's steel cables that run through the concrete around the pipe that are pre-stressed before the concrete is poured over them. So it makes it really strong pipe in theory, and you can get bigger diameters of it in theory, but the deterioration mode of it is really catastrophic, because when the steel cables that are under that stress corrode or ultimately break, as in the case of the Calgary water main টিmes 2, it truly does explode, or hard to pinpoint where that corrosion is, and more so, when there is corrosion or damage, it's really hard to repair it. You have to remove the entire section. There's no magical, you can't pinpoint in and go and fix that corrosion. And in the case of shallow water mains, like the Bears Paw one in Calgary again, it's only 3 meters below grade. So it, is affected by freeze thaw. It is affected by the chemicals that we put on our roadways and so on and so forth. So there is other deterioration methodologies that affect it as well. But to fix it, like I said earlier, you have to dig up the entire roadway to fix this pipe, which they did in the summer of 2024 when it ruptured previously. And it's interesting because Calgary, the city of Calgary, has 5,400 linear kilometers of below grade distribution piping. And this Bears Paw water main, which provides 60% of the water to the citizens of Calgary, is only 11 kilometers of that 5,400 kilometers. This is a huge budgetary problem. These emergency fixes are never cheap and never easy to do. Put it in the ground and forget about it. They're super critical to the infrastructure and to our daily lives. And also, there's been two sort of periods of time since PCC pipe has been instituted that have problem. 1975, my understanding, and that was a really critical point for this type of pipe because there was fundamental problems with the steel that was used and it becomes more susceptible to corrosion. We only know that now. Bygones be bygones, but we had to fix it. But almost more critically, and this is something that I keep trying to shout from the rooftops with my experience, is that older doesn't mean necessarily that it's aging faster. So for these types of cylindrical pipes, for example, there's also a big problem range between 1992 and early 2000s where a similar sort of thing happened with the steel. So that is deteriorating almost at the same rate as the pipes that were installed in the 1970s. And this is happening across the board. Our concrete's getting worse. We're fixing concrete more. We're building buildings faster and cheaper because construction costs are skyrocketing, and we're creating more maintenance for us. I saw on X that someone was like, we need to sue the government. Sure, but this is not one government, one mayor, one city council. This is a massive, gross mismanagement of our infrastructure across the board with every level of government in every state, province, and country in North America that has to be discussed in the public sphere. And in my perspective, we've forsaken our critical infrastructure that we citizens literally depend our lives on. We expect water to show up in our taps and our toilets to flush and our roads to be in good enough condition to drive ourselves to work. And when those aren't, it's a calamity. And now we've had two true disasters in Calgary in a year and a half, and people need to wake up. A lot of these governments, municipal governments largely, that are in sort of control of this, and the arm's reach corporations and organizations that manage the day-to-day or own the infrastructure in many cases, have either done a system of defer. We'll do it in the next budgetary cycle. We'll do it this time. We'll do it in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years. And then also, we have forsaken our infrastructure in the name of ESG and DEI and other wokeness in the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years. Made this problem even more critical in my mind. We just expect the water to show up, but we don't really understand how that happens or the mechanisms for that. And I think largely the people in charge, in power, do not understand that either. To the credit of a lot of these municipalities and arm's reach organizations, they are aware, and it is almost an overwhelmingly all-consuming problem that it's hard to know how to fix it or where to even begin. I mean, in technical publications, the city of Calgary has been sort of at the forefront of assessing and monitoring their below-grade infrastructure. Great, but they still fail. And I think that's another critical thing that we have to look at. I know the city of San Diego has this very advanced system to assess and monitor their below-grade infrastructure. Great, but when the pre-stressed piping corrodes to the point of failure, you still have to fix it somehow, and it's in the middle of a roadway, and it costs all of this money. So, yes, we need to do that. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but we have to be focused on that. And these municipal governments and arm's reach organizations really have to be very aware of how they are spending tax revenue. We need to move away from these blanket wokeness ideologies that are driving and have driven a lot of our decision making in governments at all levels, and we have to go back to the basics. Unfortunately, our election cycle is very based on emotions. And, people who are running on a platform of maintaining and upgrading and fixing critical infrastructure probably aren't going to get elected because they're boring. We have to be aware of what our infrastructure provides to us, the basic mechanisms of how it exists, and how do we go about fixing it. Really the crux of what I want to talk about on this channel, and stay tuned because I want to talk about a lot more of this. I just wanted to hop on and talk about Calgary specifically because it's obviously front and center for people. Unfortunately, a lot of decisions get made as a result of disasters. I think this brings it to the forefront, and people need to be aware of the larger picture, and that's really what I want to try to paint and illustrate with this channel, is that this is another example of a much larger systemic problem that we need to fix. Please follow along, like and subscribe, and I will be talking a lot more about this and other topics that sort of blend everything about our infrastructure, our construction, our humanity, and how we live in the world around us. So follow along. Thanks for watching.